I'm Diedre. I'm a Jamaican living in France. I've moved abroad 5 times, and today I want to talk to you about how I actually moved to France twice. I want to share my story so that you can be better prepared for when you move abroad. The first time I moved to France, it was all about like adventure. I was younger. I wanted the experience. Like I had this novelty and sense of wonder. Even like the mistakes it felt fun. It didn't feel like a burden. You can check out my video on my first move to France where I get all into detail about that. And I'll tell you why my second time in France felt so much harder. So the first one is there was less novelty and this sort of like more responsibility, more weight. The first time was like really magical, but the second time I kind of like knew the stress, I knew the paperwork, I knew the streets, I knew the lifestyle, and that sense of wonder diminished, and it wasn't the same. I mean, I was still excited, but instead there was this emotional weight of this has to work because I had chose this, right? I'm like, I'm moving back to France, and so there was that emotional weight and responsibility of this had to work. This had to work. And so there was more responsibility. I wasn't like a student or a youthful adventurer. I'm still or like I wasn't just a student running around exploring life and also discovering self. I was moving for my career. I was moving for residency status because I wanted to live in France long term. And I had a short timeline to get a job and secure my visa. When I moved back, I had like less than a year to do all of this. So I felt like I was like racing against the clock. And so, with this kind of like emotional weight of it has to work out, and this kind of like stress of running against the clock, racing against the clock, um, everything was time bound. And I was in this different stage of my life, and that added to the struggles. That added new layers to the struggles. The next reason why moving to France the second time was even harder is something that people don't talk about. There's the hidden challenge of moving abroad a second time that I don't hear a lot of people, they don't really tell you. There's this battle with what I like to call bureaucracy déjà vu. And that's knowing the mountain of paperwork that's coming. You know what's coming, but it still doesn't make it less stressful or less draining. I knew how French bureaucracy worked, but that mountain was still waiting for me. And when you move around a second time, the mountain of paperwork will still be there. It's unavoidable. You cannot escape it. And it made me actually more anxious because I knew how draining it would be. Yes, knowing that it exists means that you can prepare for it, but it's also knowing the emotional processing and the experiences that you will go through that can also ramp up the anxiety or the stress of that process. And so that's one of the hidden challenges of moving back a second time. There's also, like I mentioned, the dissonance between memory versus reality. And so that can sometimes throw you for a loop. And you're like, wait, I know this place. And you feel like you're in this sort of like twilight zone because things are familiar, but then they're not. So while it was still France, the France I knew it wasn't a France like I remembered. And when you move back to a country, you realize time or life doesn't really wait for you. Like, it, time and life moves on, it continues. Even when you're not there. And so the country changes, the people change, and you change. And so there is this next one. There is the next thing, which is the loneliness of moving back again. And this is something that truly no one talks about. When you move back, you're in between worlds. And I also felt this when I was moving back to France. You don't really relate to the people who just with their first move abroad because they're newcomers and everything is exciting. And you don't fully relate because you've done it before. But you also don't fully connect to the people who didn't leave because their life continued while you were away. And so it creates this kind of like loneliness because you're stuck in this middle transition and you don't really know where to go left or where to go right. And that's sort of like a loneliness of moving back that you will have to deal with and reckon with and acknowledge and confront and process. And it's kind of like grieving a little bit because the version of France that I carried in my mind didn't match the reality. And the version of myself who left wasn't the same woman who came back. And so there was this gap. And that gap is for me like a grieving process. And it hit a little bit harder than I expected. And that just added to the layer of moving back and why it was a bit more difficult, more challenging, I would say. There's also like another thing. This is a funny, tricky one. When you move back to a country that you've already been, or when you move abroad the second time, somehow people there's less grace. Somehow people expect you to already know everything, and even you sometimes you might be like even hard on yourself. That you expect, like you're just kind of like, well, why don't I know this? And so you give yourself less grace when there are mistakes because you feel that you should already know, and you're just like, well, I should have seen this coming, or something like this. And so it happened to me as well. It happened to me as well when I moved back to France. I was harsher on myself. I kept thinking like, well, why are you making this mistake? You should know this by now. And then it also added to that emotional weight of this is not going to of me needing this to work. And so I went into sometimes this like a vicious loop of this spiral of this is not going to work because why are you making these mistakes that you should know by now, etc. And so that's another hidden challenge of moving back to a country. Somehow there is less grace. You give yourself less grace. People expect you to make fewer mistakes, and excuses are less accepted and less allowed. The job search was I went through hundreds of interviews, and similarly I went through hundreds of rejections before finally landing a job. In fact, I literally found my job the day my visa expired. The last day my visa expired was when I found a job when I moved abroad the second time. Can you imagine the stress of that? And finally, and practically, I went through a lot of just stress in the day to day. Like I said, it was a more intentional move, and I had a very tight deadline. I had to like figure things out within less than a year. And so finding a job became high priority, but also living daily life and existing and surviving was equally high priority as well. And so I had to like balance both of those things, the stress of the future and the stress of present day living, and making it fun and enjoying things. Why am I sharing all of this with you? It's because I don't want you to go into your second move abroad or moving back thinking it will automatically be easier, because it might not be, and that's okay. Here's what I learned that might help you design your life abroad a little bit more intentionally. Recheck your intentions. Don't assume your old reasons still apply to the second move abroad. It might have shifted because during that time you've also changed and you've also shifted. Ask yourself why you want to move this time. Is it adventure? Is it career? Is it residency? Is it for personal growth? Is it for escape? Like, be clear about your intention for your second move abroad, and that really, really helps. Next, expect hidden challenges. Knowing bureaucracy is coming doesn't make it easier. Build patience into your plan, and make sure you're finding support systems that will work for you. Either you're re-engaging with old support systems or you're creating new ones, but make sure they're also there, because experience does not automatically mean smooth sailing, and sometimes this support system is even more important than you just having past experience. So expect some hidden challenges, because knowing the system does not erase the stress of navigating it again. Be kind to yourself and give yourself some grace. Like, just because you've done it once doesn't mean you won't struggle the second time. But struggle doesn't mean that you failed. Struggle signals growth. It's a part of the process. So give yourself some grace and be kind to yourself when mistakes happen. Prepare for emotional dissonance, because the place has changed, you have changed. But all of this is normal. And most of all, redefine resilience. Yeah. Moving abroad a second time isn't just about like avoiding difficulty. It's about navigating that second move with the tools and wisdom that you've garnered in your first trip. So no, my second trip to France was not easier, but it was deeper. It was more enriching. It forced me to grow in like ways the first move never could. And it taught me resilience, intentionality, and like life abroad isn't just about starting fresh. It's about redesigning your life like each time, with new intentions, with new clarity, and with a new mission for yourself that you've created that fits. If you've moved abroad more than once, I'd love to know if you felt the same. Like if the second or third time brought new kind of challenges, or if you're planning to return somewhere, tell me what you expect. Do you think it will be easier, or do you wonder if there will be like hidden challenges that might be waiting? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I will read and respond to them all. Merci, and see you next time. Ciao.